In this episode of the Exploring Information Security podcast, what is sober in cyber?
Computers now have primary control of critical functions.
Houston, recommend vector transfer.
Your go for APU shutdown on time.
Roger, go for deploy.
Nice to be in orbit.
Welcome to the Exploring Information Security podcast, where you will learn, explore, and grow your security mindset. I am your host, Timothy DeBlack, and in this episode, we'll be exploring what is sober in cyber. With me today is Jen VanAntwerp, founder of Sober Insider. Show notes can be found at exploresec.com/EAS. You can support the show by donating. There's a donate button on exploresec.com. I also take cash if you meet me in person. Feedback for the show you can send to timothy.dblock@exploresec.com. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect. Absolutely, just let me know that you're listening to the show, and I'm happy to connect. You can also rate the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. That helps me get some more visibility with people. So this was another really good one, and again with Jen talking about kind of not necessarily something technical, but organization that's really needed within our community, because we've got a lot of different things going on. I got vendors with a lot of money. There's a lot of alcohol going around, so that can get people into a lot of trouble. Resume generating events is a term among people up in the higher up, which pretty much means you get so drunk that you do something really stupid and will get you in trouble. I've been at an event where a vendor did that, and it was not good. So definitely, some alcohol is a tough thing, can be a tough thing for a lot of people. This organization is meant to give people an opportunity to go participate in something that, isn't surrounded by alcohol. And as you heard Jen talk about it, it's, I think, a really good organization. She has been sober for several years at this point. So it's good that she started as well, to give people, a place to really go. And you can hear we kind of get into some other stuff around alcohol and cybersecurity, and you can hear some of my struggles with it as well too. So this was just a really good episode and a really good conversation, which is all I'm really looking forward with these. So with that, let's get into it.
We could just do a fun voiceover, like a robot voiceover.
I have been known to do. Well, I'm messing around with AI voices, so I've already turned my boss, and I've used his voice to make him sing "I'm a Little Teapot," and then took another coworker and did the same thing. So
it's for research. It's very important research.
It is. I was told to go do the CEO, so I just haven't found time for that yet. So that's the next thing.
I'd find something real good for that.
Exactly. So how are you? It's nice to meet you.
I am good. Very nice to meet you too. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, I believe I talked to Amanda about it back in like June when we were at Show Me Gun together.
Oh, nice.
And she had talked about sober and cyber, and I was like, that sounds like good, because we actually kind of got very deep in that episode, because she had the mental health hackers village, and I've always been a big proponent of that, because I think that's something that gets overlooked. And similar to yours, right? Is there's a lot of. I was looking at your resume or your LinkedIn profile, but you're not in security, or you came up marketing? Is that?
Yep. So came up through marketing. So I do marketing for cybersecurity startups.
Gotcha. Okay, so you still have that tie in there, but you're more you've got more of a marketing background. But but you still know then that there's a lot with alcohol within.
Oh yeah. My husband is the one who kind of roped me into the industry, thank goodness. But he's been in this industry for long time. He worked at McAfee, Secure Computing, FireEye, Dragos. He's had a couple startups himself. So yeah, it's pretty prevalent for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what we kind of got into with the podcast, is just talking about alcohol. I've struggled with it. It's been something in the industry for a long time. I've even worked at a consulting where, thankfully, this company was really good about it, because we had what do they call when they all get together? It's like a sales it's like an offsite sales thing, or like
a sales kickoff, SKO.
yeah. So we had a CKO. So the entire company came along, but they one of the things I liked that they did was that like they had like, hey, we have groups set up. So because there's free alcohol everywhere. They've got a bunch of vendors at the bar, so they had a bunch of vendors and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. I did not participate. I would say I still kind of struggle with it, but it's not something that I'm necessarily. I don't know if I'm going to stop, but I'd like to, but there's just, I think just a lot of family history with it as well too, which makes it just really tough. I've always said like, I'm going to stop doing it. And then, two days in,
and then there's a wedding
yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
and that's actually what I like what Amanda said, is that she's like, 'cause me and her were talking about it, is you really have to say no to some of that stuff. And that gets very hard when it's such a social norm. Yeah. But like, how did you get like started with it? Like, what made you want to start that?
So kind of selfish reasons, honestly. So I've been sober for 23 years and I've worked in a few different industries. So before I came into cybersecurity, I initially was working in automotive and would go to conferences there and had a lot of, alcohol focused events in that industry. And then after working in automotive for about 13 years, I started working in healthcare, still in marketing. But conferences were kind of similar to, a lot of times there were just like happy hour events, and most of the socializing and the networking took place around alcohol. And I've found ways, because I've been sober for so long, I've found different ways to navigate that and different little tips and tricks. And also have, in my older age, I've given myself the grace and the permission to just not go to a thing. But I always thought like that kind of sucks, because there are a lot of great conversations that happen at those types of events, a lot of great like opportunities and developmental opportunities, career growth opportunities, sales opportunities if you're in that area. So I always kind of had this daydream of like, how cool would it be to go to an event where there was no pressure to drink whatsoever? Like none. It wasn't even a thing. And I just didn't really see a lot of events like that. There were times when I'd go to events and there would be an alternative option like a mocktail or, something other than just soda pop, which was always really, really cool and powerful, honestly, not to sound too cheesy, but there's that moment where I'm like, oh my God, I feel truly seen. Someone has a fancy mocktail that I can have and, fit right in with the big kids. But I wanted to have something where you could have all of that networking, the socializing, the interacting with no pressure to drink. Didn't see that happening. And so I thought, okay, damn it, I guess I'm just going to do it. And with my marketing background, I had done a bunch of different events in the past. So the initial launch was last year in between Black Hat and DEF CON. And I decided to just kind of throw a big event and see who would show up. I didn't really know what the hunger would be from the industry for something like this. And it was awesome. It was fantastic. The response from the industry, from the community has been fantastic. And it's grown from, we're just going to throw parties without alcohol, to more of like community focus and education. We have a Discord server where folks who are sober or choose not to drink in the industry can join and, share pet pictures, memes, any helpful articles or podcasts, different things like that. And I've spoken at a few different events too. That was scary, but I did it, and it was fun. It was a great experience to kind of get out of my comfort zone. These types of things too make me horribly nervous, but I also know that if it gets the word out a little bit to more folks and lets people know that it's okay, you're not alone. It might seem like everyone in the entire universe around you drinks and you don't, but there are actually a whole lot of us like lurking in the shadows that don't drink for whatever reason. There's tons of reasons out there.
Yeah, I felt like the newer generation feels. I know I was talking to somebody else about this, where they just the ones coming up. I don't know if they've seen all of us. I've been in the industry for a long time.
They're like, I don't want to do that.
I don't want to do that. I mean, and I will tell you, I have significantly reduced my alcohol intake. I'm trying to be more responsible with it, and I have been in those conversations where it's like I'm not getting as far down the alcohol path, and I'm like, do I sound like that? Like when I'm talking, because you're talking about, there's a lot of great conversations, but the
No.
later and later in the night and the more drinks,
You never sounded like that.
they get
Always
dumber and
sounded
dumber.
Brilliant.
Yeah. No, they sounded, we should go do this. And you wake up the next day and it's like, what did I promise to
What
do?
did
Like,
I say?
yeah, I've never been to the point where I can't remember anything. I've always been like aware. I don't know if that's just something
It's a
for
real
me.
it's a real interesting experience when you get to hear about things you've done from other people and have like zero memory about it.
Yeah, see, I never really had that. There's maybe a couple times, but I've always been to the point where it's like, I know I need to. I'm just gonna go to bed, or this is gonna suck.
Yes.
But I have noticed like they've been doing like you're talking about tricks and stuff. One of the things I realized, and I was like, oh, I should actually try that. Is our thing was like vodka soda, so someone would just get soda water with like a lime in it, right? And that looks drinky enough, so I thought that was fantastic. I have started doing more non-alcoholic beer, which I was like, what's the point? And I've kind of gotten over my ego of that, and I've started doing that. But I guess I don't know where I was going with any of that. I thought I had a point, but like, is that kind of what you're seeing, or
Yes. Yeah, and I think you're really touching on one of the interesting trends that I've seen, because I have been sober for a really long time, but it really seems like the younger generation it's not quite as prevalent. There are a lot of folks that actually come to our events who have never ever had a drink, which just like blows my mind. I'm like, what? You went through like college and never, but it's just not really something that they're as interested in or want to do. That has been kind of one of the more, I think, surprising or eye-opening things as I've had these different events, is just how many reasons there are that people might want to go to something like this. Either they just don't drink, or maybe they're not old enough to even go to a bar, but they're still part of the InfoSec community and they want to commiserate with other folks. Or, they're training for a marathon and are just not drinking, or maybe they're taking a new medication that you can't drink on, and they just don't really want to tell anybody or explain it over and over again. At our very first event, there was a lady there who was pregnant and not quite ready to tell people that she works with, and it's not really anybody's business anyway. So at this event, she knew that at this particular event, she wouldn't have to answer any questions. There wouldn't even be a question of, why aren't you drinking? Because it wasn't even going to be present. Yeah, it really does seem like the younger generation, maybe they have learned a little bit from us and our sloppiness. I hope something good came out of all of that hot ass mess. Oh, sorry. I don't know if we could cuss on here.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you, because I would think if I saw that type of event, I don't go to DEF CON or Black anymore. That's way past my time. I just don't go anymore. But if I'm at an event, I would be like, have you seen people that like are intrigued by it, that do drink, that still show up and hang out and have a good time, and kind of what's their feedback?
Absolutely. There are a lot of folks that come because, maybe they've been in Vegas for 3 or 4 days already. And every event that you go to, people are like putting drinks in your hand automatic. Like, I just want a break. I just need like one, at least a couple hours. And we have some folks that will come to our event first, and then they'll go to their other events, later on in the evening, which is totally fine. At the in-person events, everyone is welcome. We just ask, obviously, that you don't drink a whole lot before you come to the event, because
it's not the place to get sobered up.
No.
No. You will stick out like a sore thumb very quickly. Again,
you need some resources and help. Just contact me personally. We can talk. But there are tons of people that come just to see even what it's like. And one of the big things that I try to do with these events is I want people to recognize that you don't have to have the alcohol there in order for it to be fun. We still try to kind of blow the roof off. And actually at our last, it was kind of our anniversary event of when we first launched. We had it at the same spot at the Mob Museum in Las Vegas. We had a last call for non-alcohol that I ended up having to do because people were still there partying up until the time that we had to close the doors. I'm like, how cool is this? That we got people, first off the strip, because the Mob Museum is more in like the downtown area. Got people off the strip, hanging out, having a good time, interacting with each other. And then we had to like kick them out. It's super cool. It was really, really neat. The good thing that people have mentioned is that the quality of the conversations has been really, really good at these events, because I try to have a good mix of like places to sit down if you need to rest your feet, actual food. A benefit of not spending your food and beverage minimum on alcohol is that you can opt for the higher end food options. So people have like real food, somewhere to sit, and then the music isn't so loud that you have to yell at each other across the bar. You can actually talk to each other and then remember what people said, usually, unless your memory is terrible like mine anyways, even without the booze.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a trick that I don't think a lot of people realize, is that they crank up the volume in bars and other places so you can't hear each other, because if you can't hear each other, you're going to sit there and drink more. And it's like a study and like proof. And so that's good to hear that you're just like, no, we're not. I mean, that sounds like a great place to go hang. And again, like you said, I have a lot of conversations just sitting in a conference, but it's, just, and that's one where they don't do alcohol until after the conference, and I have a lot of great conversations. And I wish I could get more into that like later on, but like you're saying too, is that like if it's there and it's available, and especially if it's like free and you're not paying for it, right, which is often what they are, it's really hard to say no to that.
Yeah. And there are a lot of times that people are just, that they're just trying to be polite, like, what can I get you to drink? Oh, here, I got you this. So that trick of always having something in your hand, soda water with a little cranberry juice and a lime is my go-to for sure. Always having something in your hand so that way people don't, try to put something alcoholic in there. little tips and tricks like that. But honestly, just having an alternative option. I know that having a completely dry event is definitely not for everyone, and I'm not trying to push that type of an agenda whatsoever, but just having an option, something like a mocktail or something other than a really sugary soda type beverage is it's really important. It means the world, honestly, to folks like me who don't want to drink.
Are you finding it's not just about the alcohol, like as far as like drugs and stuff?
Yes.
Is this aligned with that as well too?
Yeah, definitely. I think at the conferences, alcohol is definitely the most prevalent. It's the most socially acceptable, but people from all walks of life, addiction does not discriminate. It really and truly does not. So the Discord group that we have, it's open to folks who are trying, to not drink or use other substances. And it's definitely challenging. I feel like we have a very stressful job anyways. I know that I work on the marketing side, but just seeing folks who, work in a SOC or, everybody, the stakes are really high. And the missions are really powerful. And so I think that makes it even more of a struggle for people to find that balance between personal time and work time, because the things that we're helping to defend are critical and important. And that's a lot of pressure to put on humans.
Yeah, well, and my experience has that what you're talking about has been the stress of the job is especially someone working in incident response or a SOC. It's just constant, and that's what I tell people in security is, especially when I was coming up, there's like maybe 3 of us on the security team. It's like where our job is 24/7, 365, whether we like it or not, because if something happens, we're getting called in, and that you're absolutely right, and that's where I struggled. I kind of had some issues at work. The pandemic really accelerated a lot of that.
Yeah.
We could probably have a whole podcast just on the pandemic and how that, and like, just for example, one, it's stressful. I remember just being constantly exhausted, and it was kind of this cycle, especially with alcohol, where it's kind of like, because Zoom fatigue is real. I don't think people really realize that as much as if you're on a screen all day, versus I enjoyed being in the office because that allowed me to that gave me an excuse to get away from the screen, go play some ping pong with somebody, go just talk to somebody away from my screen. Being in meetings, and I was in management, being in meetings all day, it's really hard to get off that at 5 o'clock or later and be like, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
And that's what I told people too, is it wasn't a drive home to kind of decompress. It was like, I walked to my fridge, and
or you just kind of like turned your chair like, okay, I guess I'm off work now, but not really.
Exactly. Yeah. So that definitely didn't help. And I have to remind myself that and I actually last year, I even struggled with it up until last year, where I actually got in to some really stressful jobs. And it was like, I had to take a step back. Okay, this might not be working, and so I need to. So I'm now in security awareness. So a lot like you, I feel like I'm doing a lot of marketing of just security within the company, which is a lot less stressful, and it's helped me. But it's definitely like you're talking about, the stress of the job can. And I just remember I try to think back and not like beat myself up too much, because it's like it was very tough, especially during the pandemic, there wasn't a lot to do. And I unfortunately had some neighbors. So we kind of created our own little bubble, but it's like we couldn't go anywhere. And it's like, all right, let's just get some drinks and hang out and chat or whatever.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it's just that cycle too. It's like you're tired then the next day. And so by the time you get to the end of the day, all your willpower is gone. And yeah. So
Yep. And then what's the point? It is a depressant. And that was something that, as crazy as it sounds, I didn't realize that until after I quit drinking and started doing some more education and learning about it. I didn't realize that. So the times that I would drink the most were the times that I absolutely should have stayed so far away from alcohol, because it was usually when I was down or not feeling too great about myself. I'm like, God, that was just, feeding the beast. And then it just kind of spirals out. But yeah, the pandemic was rough for a lot of reasons. I think even for people who aren't, I'm obnoxiously extroverted. I absolutely love being around people. But even for people who are a little more introverted, like my husband, he's an introvert, but he can play an extrovert on TV, that type of person. It's still tough because we are almost like symbiotic. We depend upon other people. We need to be around and interact with people. And this screen, it's better than nothing, but it is not the same. And like you said, it's just exhausting. I can go to a conference and run around a billion different exhibit halls all day long and feel energized. Whereas if I'm sitting in a 6-hour Zoom conference, I'm like exhausted by the end of the day. It's weird. Yeah, pandemic was definitely a time when a lot of people did some introspection, and it was a struggle for a lot of folks, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have a success story since you started Sober and Cyber that you can talk about?
I don't really want to talk about the journeys of other people, but some of the feedback that I've gotten after the events, just anonymously, has been great. People realizing that they're not alone, that they're not the only ones. I actually did have one funny instance. I can share this one because it had to do with myself. So there's a group called Beer ISAC in OT security, and it's a community where you get coined if you do something great for the OT community. And I was amazingly, surprisingly coined because of the community efforts that I tried to do. And when they coined me, it's called Beer ISAC, and it's just information sharing. But the joke was that everybody solved all the problems of OT security as they were drinking, but then the next morning, nobody could remember what all the solutions were. So it's sort of an information sharing support community, and it's a really great group of folks. But they were joking as we did our first coin call. They're like, "Oh, you're the first sober person in Beer ISAC." And I kind of cracked up because I knew that there were at least 2 other people within our Discord server who were in Beer ISAC and also sober. I'm like, actually, I'm not. We're all around.
You guys are like the Illuminati.
Yeah. And that has been kind of a cool, I'd say, success story, is just other folks realizing that hey, sober people, we look just like you.
Yeah.
We really are everywhere, but it's not something that you really talk about a lot. Thankfully, there's a lot less stigma against it now than there was a couple decades ago when I first got sober. But there are still times when, at a job, you might be looked over to go to an event or something because you don't drink, or, just not be invited to different things. Or, if you need to go to some, additional type of care facility, there is still a lot of stigma in that area. But thankfully, it's not as bad as it used to be. And I think things like this, thank you so much for having me on this podcast, because I think just talking about it, and I love that Amanda talks about stuff with mental health hackers. And I know Mind Over Cyber is another group that's been, coming up at the different conferences, focusing on finding that balance between, the stressful things that we deal with and not trying to find those, not so healthy ways to deal with it and cope, because there are a lot of other things that we can do. Deep breaths. I don't know. Deep breath, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, well, and I started studying Stoicism even before the pandemic. And again, it's a lot of the same stuff you're talking about. It's like mental awareness. It's paying attention to, and that's really what the pandemic did, is it forced me, as I'm doing it, I'm like, I don't like this feeling. And once I started paying attention to it, it like we talked about, it's like a depressant. really causes you once you start getting off of it, like I've talked about, I've even found that I have more energy around doing stuff, and I feel better, and I'm doing a lot more work, and not to say I was working, but I can't think. It's like I'm essentially exhausted, dehydrated. I can't think. I don't even know how I functioned previously having drinking, and it really all started when I picked up a Whoop, which is a device you can wear that tracks your sleep, your strain, your stress, all that stuff. But you journal every day, and alcohol was the first thing. It's been the one thing that stayed on my journal because it's always been something I was concerned with. And I was shocked after 90 days, because it does in 90-day increments. 90 days, it's like I've only not drinking 11 out of the 90 days. And I was like, oh, that's not good. This was also during the pandemic. I picked it up in like November of the pandemic. And again, I don't think I was drinking that much, but I have looked back at some journaling and some other stuff. And I'm like, I was still struggling with it back then. Yeah. Thankfully, it's getting better and better. But that's I do, and that's why I like the groups that are popping up, like yours, Amanda's. I haven't heard of Mind Over Cyber, but I'm definitely going to look them up. Is some of the mental things around, and I think that as a society, we're getting a better understanding of how that's actually impacting us. And again, the whole even just working thing, because in the past, I know I felt the strain to work, and that's probably where I burned myself out too. That I went to alcohol was I was working. I always say I worked 40 hours, but I was probably working a little bit more because I did stuff outside of work that really helped my career, and that has been, that's been highlighted again about slowing down and think. And I just read a book by Cal Newport. I don't know if you read anything with Cal Newport, but he talks essentially about like slowing down. So slow productivity, being willing. We want this immediacy now, but it's like some of this stuff takes time, and you don't realize that until you actually look back at it.
Yeah, and I love that just shining a light on something and tracking it. It's really eye-opening. And sometimes you're like, damn it, I guess I got to stop doing this now. Crap. I have a stat. Oh, actually, hold on. I pulled it up in case the opportunity arose. But it was, let me see. I think it was Tynes had conducted a study back in 2022 called The State of Mental Health and Cybersecurity. And this stat just totally blew my mind. Out of the folks that they had trying to remember how many folks were originally in the study, but of the folks that they had surveyed, almost 20% of them consumed more than 3 alcoholic beverages every single day. So it basically turned out to be like 1 in 5 of us. And it was a study that was just of people within information security. And there's not a lot of like really focused studies like that. I'm hoping maybe that's something that that as time permits and resources permits, that we can do a more in-depth study about addiction and consumption within our industry. But that just blew my mind that 1 in 5, if you're looking around either at a conference or even in your office, it is definitely a coping mechanism and something that exists for a reason. So just trying to figure out what those core root reasons are is the most important stuff, because you can stop doing a thing, but still have the symptoms and the reason why you started doing the thing in the first place, and then replace it with something else that isn't always great, like addiction to work or different things like that. So digging in and getting deep, it's tough, it's scary, but it really is helpful.
Well, and it takes time. So when I did that, it was back in 2020. So right now I'm up to 35 days out of 90 days, which is a massive improvement, but that took 4 years. And I will say it's not easy. And I recognize that too, that's why you can't, because I've always said, oh yeah, I can just quit. And then you try to quit and you're like, maybe I can't just quit. Or you're just like, there was this thing, and you make all these excuses. But it does take, it kind of takes a lot of work. And I smoked. I picked up smoking when I was in the Navy, and I was like immediately wanted to quit, and it took me 7 years to quit. And so I've always recognized that. Yeah, I always recognize that stuff like that. And like you said, it's a much more socially acceptable, and it's just about available everywhere.
Yeah. The smoking was tough. So when I quit drinking, I quit drugs and cigarettes. I quit everything all at the same time. And honestly, quitting smoking initially was a lot harder than quitting drinking and drugs.
Oh, really?
Because I had way more triggers. I didn't like drink and do drugs all day long, but every single day I smoked. And it was ritual, routine. Like I would
Yep.
get up in the morning, have a cigarette, have a meal, have a cigarette, have coffee with friends, playing cards, have a cigarette. It was like all throughout the day. Now, granted, it's definitely less socially acceptable now than it used to be, but it used to be like so many triggers. So that was really, really tough at first. That was challenging. Like, what do I even do with my hands? What do I do with my hands?
Yeah. No, and I'm actually glad. I think you quit before vaping came around, because I was like,
Yeah.
I'd probably be vaping right now.
Oh, I sure would. I'm sure I would.
So one of the things I have found talking to other people that have been in the career industry long enough, especially when I'm open to them about talking about alcohol, I find that there's actually a lot of people in the same boat as me. It's like, yeah, I know I drink too much. I have a glass of wine or two every night. I know I need, that's not necessarily going to be a good thing. So like, I think just talking about it in general is always, that's why I like this stuff, right?
Yes.
It's talking about it, sharing your experiences, because other people be like, yeah, I know, that's good to hear. It's just very comforting to hear that other people have had the same struggle, and that because I have other examples, and usually I think they're a little bit more outspoken. So like, they just quit and they just do it cold turkey, and they're able to do it. And they just, for whatever reason, that they're able to do that. I know, again, going through smoking and working through alcohol now, it's not as easy. And you're talking about the same thing. It's habit. It's changing habits. That's not something that someone can just do and flip on a dime.
There are so many different pathways and journeys, and I always try to just speak from my own experience and the things that I've gone through, because I know that the healthiest lifestyle for me looks different from the healthiest lifestyle for you. I know that I personally can't ever have a drink or do a drug or have a puff on a cigarette. I can't do that personally. And I had a friend ask me, like, do you think you really, after all these years, do you think you would just like spiral into oblivion after having one sip of booze? And I said, realistically, no. It's not like that one sip would instantly like, boom, okay, I'm on the bar again, totally drunk. That wouldn't happen. But what would happen is even worse. I would feel guilty. I would feel ashamed. And that shame is the thing that, at least for myself and my journey through sobriety, when I got sober, it was the first thing that I had ever done that I was actually proud of, which is kind of crappy to even think about because I was in my 20s. But it really and truly was the first thing that I was like, holy crap, I did the damn thing. And that is one of the things, the mantras that kind of keeps me sober every single day, is I don't want to mess that up. And I don't want to become that person again. So that is what my personal journey looks like. But there are, I think, a lot of other people out there who can start to moderate or change behaviors and find a balance that makes sense to them, where they're, my husband's one of those people where he's never done a drug in his entire life. He's never smoked a cigarette, but he likes whiskey. He likes the taste of it. And so he did have kind of a funny experience where he was on a diet where he wasn't supposed to drink while he was on the diet. And he went to a conference, the first one he'd ever been to where he wasn't drinking at all. After day 2, he came back to the hotel and he was like, how do you do this? How do you actually do this? And it's tough. It is a challenge, but I just went off on a tangent and completely.
No,
that's how I know we're having a good conversation. I'm like, la, la, la.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna identify with that. I've never done. I will say this streak kind of was broken. I've never done any sort of drugs, like, and it's I know what you're talking about, where it's like, at this point, it's kind of like, why? And two, it's like, I'm not going to pick up weed because I'm still working. I worked on cigarettes, and that's a big concern. But then also alcohol too. I know that's a thing. And people are like, well, I just substitute that for, and it's like, I don't know that that's any better. And so why would I just substitute one thing? Pick your poison is kind of the thing. So I can totally identify with that, where it's it's kind of, I don't know if I want to call it like a streak or whatever, but it is definitely, once you're like, yeah, I like that what you said too, is that you're very proud of that. And that's something you accomplish, and to just keep it going. And that can be a motivating factor as well.
Yes,
too.
absolutely. And I won't say that in my 23 years that there haven't been times when I've really felt like I want to drink. And the most powerful tool in those moments is my mouth. I say it out loud. I say it out loud to my husband, to the people who care about me, to the people I trust. And it helps me to stay accountable, because the silence really is the thing that's a killer. Like the unfortunately, the times when you're the most down, usually you don't want to talk about it with anyone, because you feel ashamed. You feel like, nobody's going to understand. I should just be able to. But sometimes we just can't. Like, you cannot. There's too many things going on. You can't deal with it. So I just say it out loud. And the weirdest thing happens. It's like it becomes less powerful, less ominous, that desire to have a drink or use drugs. Once I say the words out loud, like, I really want to drink right now, it instantly becomes less powerful. I don't know if that's just me, or if that's the admitting it out loud and talking about it that really helps. But that is a good segue to, if somebody wants to start making some little incremental changes here and there. That whole like never again is really scary. Just thinking about that, because you fast forward multiple years, like, really, am I never ever gonna again? But just talking to people that you trust about what your goals are. Like, here's something that I would like to do. I want to maybe do a dry July or dry January, and talking to the people that you trust about that is really important. Like any goal, when you can tell more people about it, it helps you to stay accountable to the goals that you've set.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And one of that actually kind of does go to the next thing, is if I'm someone that likes to drink, right, and I'm dealing with what are some of the, because I think one of the things, and I think people are recognizing this more, is for like pressuring people into drinking that don't want to drink, right? So how can you, again, identify some of that and be like, okay, I need to back off on this person, especially if they're in a social situation where it's like they want to be around everybody, but there's going to be alcohol there. Like, what are some of the, I guess, key indicators that someone might be, and they don't necessarily want to be as forthcoming about
right.
it?
Yeah. Maybe just take the very first no thank you as an answer.
Yes.
Just take the first no thank you as an answer, and don't ask any other qualifying questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably the best advice I could give, is like, because like I was saying, that you're just trying to be polite, like, hey, what can I get you to drink? Do you want something to drink? People say no. Like, okay, that's it.
Yeah. And actually, at my work, I have a guy who he's even said out loud that he doesn't drink during the week. Now, I've seen him go out to some of the events with me. He has usually like one. And so I don't pressure him. I don't even bother asking him, because he'll get his own drink when he's ready. Right. So yeah, are there any others, or you kind of just feel like that's just the big one, is just saying if someone says no, thank you?
I'd say just the big one. And just even considering, I think if you're even trying to think of what to say or how to say it, you're already doing a pretty good job. Just even trying to consider how to be considerate of that. But yeah, just take that no thank you as the end of the conversation.
No means no, which we've been saying this for a while now. Yeah. No, I'm with you. And for whatever reason, alcohol, it and again, like I said, I think people are starting to recognize this. If someone says no, they don't want to, they're not feling like drinking, or they said no, thank you.
Or even just say like, oh, can I get you a water?
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody needs water.
Yep, exactly. So what's next for Sober and Cyber?
We have an event. I don't have it on the website yet, but we have a booth coming up at Wild West Hack and Fest. So that's going to be in Deadwood in, I think, maybe 3 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks, somewhere around there. After that, I'm taking a little bit of time off. It's a fully, volunteer-led type of a community. And I've got some other work-related stuff coming up that's a bit of a crunch. So no other events through the end of this year. We might do something in December at the Cyber Marketing Conference in Philly. So any, cybersecurity marketers, check that one out. So that would be like towards the middle of December. I've been wanting to start a podcast for a while, and I know I've been saying that forever, but as you know, it takes a lot more work than folks would anticipate. Like I have all the best of intentions and ideas and vision around that. Yeah. And I want to make sure that I do it, right. And I've just been slammed with, like my full-time, my day job, and I just haven't had enough time to do that. But that I would love to do something like that. And my vision for the podcast would be to have folks from the cybersecurity industry who are, sober, come on and just talk about their pathways into and through cybersecurity and their pathways into and through sobriety and where those touch and intersect, because everybody's story, like all the people that I've met from this industry, that's kind of what won me over. My husband kept telling me for the longest time, like, hey, I think you should apply to these jobs. I think you would like it. When I met the people, I'm like, everyone is so cool. Everyone has like the most interesting hobbies and the coolest little like side hustles and just layers upon layers upon layers. And I'm sure that's true in every industry, but I feel like here everyone's just their hobbies are just a little cooler. So I'd love to just have a chance for people to talk about their journeys, whether they want to be on camera or anonymized, because I always try to be respectful of that too. And let folks know, like you were saying earlier, if you know that you're not the only one, then there's a lot of power and strength in that and understanding that.
That's cool. Awesome. How can people get involved?
If you are a sober person within our industry, join the Discord. There's some links on the website for that, or you can reach out to me on, Twitter, LinkedIn. We also have a Mastodon account, and I'll get you the link to the Discord. We're trying to grow that. That's been a little bit slower. While our in-person events are open to everyone, I do want the Discord server to be a little more focused just for sober people within our space, so that way people feel comfortable sharing everything, the nitty-gritty, nuts and bolts. And then when we do have events, we're always looking for different sponsors or donors. We've got some fantastic supporters. Oh, we have merch. We have some cool merch. We have a little merch shop as well. You can get some shirts, whether you're part of the sober squad or the support squad. We've got some cool shirts, some tie-dye shirts and stuff too. So those are probably the best way to support. Spread the word, follow us on social, all that fun stuff.
So if by chance someone at a company is listening to this, like what can companies do to really help people trying to stay sober?
If they are planning an event, like a networking event or team building event, just try to consider and think about having an alternative option from the very beginning. Work that into the planning from the very start, so that way it's not an afterthought. And if you do decide to have some sort of an alternative option or fun activity or something that doesn't involve alcohol entirely, or that will have a mocktail or some other option, make sure that you talk about that and promote it, so that way people hear about it. Because another thing that I've heard from folks is that they just stopped going to the networking events completely, which isn't great, because they bring so much color and flavor. Every single person and their diverse background is just awesome. So you not coming to the party's missing out from you not being there. So if you're throwing an event and you're going to have an alternative option, talk about that, share that. And that way people can know, okay, there's going to be something for me there. Maybe I'll try this one out and see what this event is like.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Any other last thoughts or anything else you want to plug?
I'd say just follow us on social to stay on top of the things we've got going on. I really would love to have some more of the more sober folks within our Discord community. So join. We've got, I think, a little over 80 now, so not a whole heck of a lot. And I'd love to see that grow. I know that we're out there. Like I said, we're everywhere.
Everywhere.
Don't be scared. Join the Discord. We have a semi-monthly virtual, I call it the happiest hour meetup, where we'll just meet and hang out for about an hour. We did, actually with Mental Health Hackers, for one of those happiest hour events, we did a painting party. So a sober sip and paint party that was really, really fun. I'm going to try alternating, having one in a month be a social event where we just hang out and shoot the breeze, and then the next one be some sort of a fun activity. So yeah, join the Discord and follow us on social.
Awesome. Well, Jen, it was a pleasure. Thank you for joining me to discuss Sober and Cyber.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much for even having me on board. This was awesome.